I totally screwed myself with parking so close to the wall here. Good thing I am a skinny dude. Oh, come on, not again. There we go. Morning. What is going on, guys? So before we jump into today's video, the FRS badly needs a wash. She is still dirty from the last drift event. The FRS is all clean. Yes, it's not 110% clean since I am going to be drifting it this weekend at the Orlando Speed World. Now we can jump into what I really wanted to talk about in this video. So definitely one of the most asked questions with regards to the car is what tires I run. Now, and I know I've mentioned it in the past, exactly what brand of tires I'm using, but I have been changing it up recently. So I figured it would be perfect to make a video on. And before we start getting into the nitty-gritty, I do want to say this is just what I recommend based off of my experience drifting that car. Different cars might react differently to the tires that I like, especially if you are running more power. But since I have 200 crank horsepower in the FRS, these recommendations should go for anyone running a low horsepower drift car. And it might not apply that much to you guys running, you know, big power. So jumping right into things. On the front of the car, I am running the Federal 595 RS RRs. Now Federal does make an RSR version, and I want to say that the only difference is the tread pattern. I don't have any experience with the RSRs, but the one thing that I can tell you about these is that these tires are awesome. Before I got these tires, I was running the Dunlop Direzza Z2 Star Specs, and those tires were phenomenal. Yeah, they're a little bit more on the expensive side, and the Federals are a lot cheaper. And for the money, I want to say the RSRRs are right at the level of grip that the Z2 Star Specs provide. However, there is one downfall, and this pretty much only applies to all of you guys that daily your cars. These tires are pretty loud on the highway. The Star Specs were definitely quieter, but I think that is a fair trade-off to spend less on a tire that's just a little bit louder. And as far as tire wear is concerned, I really have no gripes. I mean, it would be kind of stupid for me to complain about tire wear, especially given that I am about -5 degrees of camber up front. As far as the size is concerned, I run a 215 45/17. Yes, I know that is a relatively small tire, but I need to run such a small tire in order to have clearance on full lock since I have the angle kit. You definitely want to be sure that you don't get too wide of a front tire. Even on stock cars with stock angle, there is still the possibility that you will rub. Now for the rear. These are the Federal SS 595s. Yeah, I know I'm running Federals. No, I am not sponsored. Now for the 2 years that I've been drifting, I first started out on crappy used tires that I would just throw onto the rear of the car. And then I thought that I found my favorite tire, which was the Nankang NS20s. I would definitely say those tires were great. I still recommend those tires, but I don't love them nearly as much as I love the Federals. And here's basically why. The Nankangs are super cheap, really hard compound, and last forever. But as with all things in life, there's trade-offs with everything. They didn't really hold grip all that well. And as soon as I started getting into tandeming, grip becomes an important factor, especially when you're trying to keep up with everyone. And since I've switched to these Federals, I've had relatively no problems keeping up with guys that are running more power than me. Of course, there are a bunch of other drivers with tons of more power and grip, but these 595s give a surprising amount of grip, especially for not being all that expensive. And as far as the sizing is concerned, I typically run a 215/45. I have experienced with a 205/50 as well as a 205/40. And I don't really have to say much about the differences because I didn't really feel any. When it comes to drifting, the compound is the most important part. You might think that the width of the tire is the determining factor with how much grip you have, but that is definitely not the case. You really want to look at the treadwear rating. The lower the treadwear rating, the more grip that the tire technically has. However, that is at the expense of tire life. I want to say that the treadwear rating on the 595s is 240. They grip up nice and they last a pretty long time. And I could actually show you guys the rest of my spares in here. Brand new set of 595s. I first started drifting here in Orlando. I actually tried drifting with the 595s up front on the car. Yes, I know I said that they're grippy, but they're not as grippy of a tire that you would want to be running up front, at least in my experience. It wasn't something noticeable to me at the time, but after running the Z2 Star Specs and these RSRRs, there's definitely a difference. You can see that I have a set of 595s that I drifted on to about 50% life. And with my experience with the Federals, when they start to lose tread, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're losing traction. They pretty much sustain their traction all the way until you pop them, or at least get to the belts. Here is one that I actually popped while drifting. Now, I know you might be thinking to yourself, why would I say that I like these tires so much if they're gonna delaminate like that? But that's literally because I was just pushing it way too much than I should have. See, this is the difference between telling yourself to cool it and just going balls to the wall and popping tires. Oh yeah, the ATR Sports from Achilles. I forgot about these. They ran pretty well, I wanted to say. However, they just didn't have the grip that I was looking for. Which is exactly why I am drifting on Federals so much. So as much as it seems like I am a Federal fanboy, if there's one thing you can take away from this video, it's that these Federal tires are pretty solid for us low-powered drift guys. I do remember reading online not too long ago that people putting down big power had issues with the Federals chunking up and delaminating like within a couple of laps. Like I said, I'm only telling you guys my experience drifting this super slow car. Smaller tires with more grip will always trump bigger tires with less grip. Now let's see, now is there anything else that I could recommend? Oh, tire pressures. That's important. That is super important actually. I run around 45 to 50 PSI in the rear. Since the tires are pretty grippy, you can overcome that grip by adding more tire pressure. Basically because when you're drifting around and transitioning on corners, a lower PSI tire will effectively use more sidewall, which will slow down the transition of the car. With more PSI, you effectively stiffen up the sidewall, which keeps your transitions nice and snappy. And again, with my experience, I like having those snappy transitions. It allows me to reel in those guys that I'm tandeming with. And as far as a PSI for the front is concerned, I typically go around 30 to 35 PSI. Low PSI up front for grip, high PSI in the rear to keep the tires spinning, and you got yourself a solid low horsepower drift car. So if there's anything that I left out, I'll do a little write-up down in the description, basically just covering everything that I've covered in this videos. So be sure to check that out if I've said anything that you need clarification on. So on that note, I hope all of you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop me a like and I will see you next time. Peace.